Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to the Tax Playbook YouTube channel. I'm Trenda Hackett CPA with the Web CPA Virtual Tax Clinic. And do I have some great information for you today? But before we get started, as always, I'd like you to like this video, share this video, comment on this video, and subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn your notifications on so that you can be in the know when we are uploading more content. So let's get to our topic or our question of the day. So it's a regular day here in the tax clinic, and in the tax clinic, I get lots of questions. But this question really stood out to me because this time of year, I get questions from businesses. And the big question that I'm getting is that I filed my business as an LLC last year, or I've recently filed my business as an LLC. And the question that business owners want to know is, which tax form do I need to file? And so I find myself answering that question a lot in the tax clinic, and I thought I would come on and share that information with you with the hopes that it'll help you get those questions answered so that you can be prepared when you go to your tax professional. So which form should you file, tax form should you file as an LLC? Well, that depends. It depends on how many owners are in your LLC or LLC members. So in an LLC, the owners are referred to as members. So that depends on how many members are in your LLC when you did your paperwork with whatever state that you formed your LLC in. So from the IRS standpoint, the IRS allows you to choose how you want to be taxed. However, if you don't make a choice, there is a default. So the first thing I want to talk about is the default. What happens if you just don't do anything? Which form should you file? And then the other part I want to talk about is you may want to change the default to a better entity for taxes, entity type for taxes that is more advantageous for your business. And we'll talk about that as well. So let's talk about these defaults. So you filed an LLC, and let's say in your LLC, you only have one member and you're considered a single member LLC. Now you did your paperwork with the state, but when you get over to the IRS side, the IRS says by default, a single member LLC is taxed as a sole proprietorship. And you may be saying, what does that mean to me? A sole proprietorship is a business that has one owner. And for tax purposes, a sole proprietorship will file their business activity along with their personal tax return on a 1040, and you would file a Form 1040 Schedule C. So if you are a single member LLC, by default, you would file a Form 1040 Schedule C attached to your personal IRS Form 1040 tax return. Now, if you created your LLC and you have two or more members, then by default, you are a partnership and you have a different filing requirement. So if you are by default a partnership, then that means that the IRS is going to require you to file what's called an IRS Form 1065 partnership tax return. So in addition to the owner's regular 1040 personal tax return, for the business part of it, you would have to file the IRS Form 1065 partnership tax return because your LLC has two or more members. So what, in essence, you'll be filing that form, IRS Form 1065, to show the income and the expenses of the partnership. However, the partnership itself doesn't pay the taxes. The partnership will have to give each one of its members what's called a Form 1065 Schedule K1 to show their share of the income and the expenses and the profits of the business for the year. Then those owners or members of that LLC will take that K1 and put it on their personal 1040 when they file. So just so to answer that question, you filed your business, you set up your business or you form your business as an LLC with the state, and you want to know which tax form you should file. So those are what I just talked about is the defaults, because the IRS doesn't have a form that says, a LLC tax return. What the IRS does is says by default, based on how many owners or members are in your LLC, here's your filing status. If it's 1, it's automatically a sole proprietorship. You file it on the Form 1040 Schedule C. If it's 2 members, 2 or more members, then you have to file an IRS Form 1065, give each one of the business owners a Schedule K1, and then they will report that income on their personal return and pay the tax at the personal level. Now, you may be asking, okay, so those are the defaults, but I've heard some things out here about, I can change to an S corporation, or I want to change my business to a C corporation, or I want to change, my business, how I'm taxed as an LLC, to another entity type that is more advantageous for my business. So can you change the defaults? Yes, you can. There's several ways to change the default, but it depends on what your default is. So let's just say you are a single member LLC and you have just that one member. So what are your options? So think about it. So your option wouldn't be to change from a sole proprietorship to a partnership. Why? Because your business is just one owner. So you couldn't change from a sole proprietorship or a single member LLC for tax purposes to a partnership, because you have to have 2 owners. However, what are your options? You can change from a sole proprietorship to a C corporation or an S corporation. So let's talk about that single member LLC. What are your options? So you can go from a single member LLC or a sole proprietorship, being taxed as a sole proprietorship, to a C corporation or an S corporation. Now, the question is, how do you do that? I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail in this video, but I will give you the tax form that you need to file. So if you are a single member LLC and you now want to change your your entity type for taxes to a C corporation, then you would need to file IRS Form 8832. Form 8832, and you'll see it there on the screen. Now, if you say I am a single member LLC, my default is a sole proprietorship, and I want to be an S corporation, then you need to file IRS Form 2553. So, single member LLC, your options are a C corporation or an S corporation. Now, if you are a multi-member LLC, that means you have 2 or more members or owners in your LLC. You may be saying, what are my options? So what are your options? By default, you're already a partnership, right? So by default, you're already a partnership. So what are your options? You can go from a partnership. You can go from a partnership to a C corporation or to an S corporation. And guess what? The rules are still the same. The forms are still the same. If you want to change from that partnership, being taxed as a partnership, and want to go to being taxed as a C corporation, you would file to change that entity type Form 8832 for that part, the multi-member or LLC. And again, if you're by default a partnership and you now want to be taxed as an S corporation, you would need to file Form 2553. So if you kind of see how that works. So this is a question that I get a lot of. Now, so those are all like if you want to change the default, which form should you file? Now, some of you may or may not have gotten a tax ID number or EIN number. And that employer identification number, normally businesses, that you get that when you try to open up a bank account. A bank will require you to have that employer identification number, or you may get the employer identification number if you are paying employees. However, if you received or you've gotten an employer identification number and you want to know what are my filing requirements, you can go back and get that letter that you received from the IRS that told you what your EIN or your tax ID number is for your business. And that letter will explain to you your filing requirements. So that's really what you want to go by if you have applied for and received an EIN number from the IRS. It's going to show you what tax returns and tax forms you are required to file. So let's just wrap this up in a nutshell. If you already have gotten an EIN number, check your letter. It's a letter CP 575 that the IRS gives you to say this is your employer identification number. But in that letter, they will tell you these are the tax forms that we are expecting from you. If you have not gotten a tax ID number and you're just doing things in your social security number, what have you, then you got to think about, okay, what forms you need to file. It depends. If you're a single owner LLC, you're going to do the Form 1040 Schedule C. And of course, if you are a multi-member LLC, that means you have two or more owners, you're going to do the IRS Form 1065 Partnership Return. And again, you can change those. And what you want to think about is the Form 8832 if you want to go to a C corporation, and Form 2553 if you want to go and change to an S corporation. So I know I have shared a lot, but I wanted to come on here and just share with you, just in case you're a business out there that have that question, that you may have set up your LLC and now you're trying to wonder what tax forms do you have to file with the IRS. If you have any questions about anything that I share on any of these videos, be sure to visit us at www.virtualtaxclinic.com. Now, that's all I have for you today. Again, I want to remind you to share this video, comment on this video, like this video, and subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you can get notified. So until next time, guess what I'm going to be doing? What I'm going to be doing is sitting right here to welcome you in when you hit play on the very next episode of the Tax Playbook.